Okay, let's go ahead and finish up this chapter, and we'll finish up by taking a look at this current slide, which deals with religion and government. Now, in America, this is what we refer to as the separation of church and state. America has separation of church and state because it is known as a secular country. Now, secular refers to being removed from the dominance of religion. Now, a quick little American history lesson. When America was first founded, and this idea of separation of church and state was written into the Constitution, America was the first country to have such a statement in its governance. Other countries in Europe, there was no separation of church and state. And this was particularly true in England at the time, which is why the Pilgrims came to America, because the Pilgrims were being persecuted in England. Now, England at this time, the leader of the Church of England was the king. So if you went against church law, you could be punished just like you could for breaking civil laws. And the other countries in Europe were the same way. In other words, if your king or queen was Catholic, then you would become Catholic. Then if you got a different king or queen and that monarch was Protestant, then you would become Protestant. So, America was set up under the ideas of being a secular country and having church and state separate. Now, what's interesting is that when America began this what at the time was basically viewed as an experiment, the other countries in Europe laughed and scoffed at America, saying that it would never work. But it did work. So now, around the world, there are very few countries that do not have separation of church and state. And in fact, the only countries that still, to this day in 21st century, have religion and government intertwined are the Islamic states, specifically Saudi Arabia, as well as Iran, and there's some others in the Middle East too. So what this means is that Islamic law is part of civil law. So if you break, a teaching in the religion, you could be punished the same way as you could for, say, for example, robbing a bank. Same way. So America has the separation of church and state to remove religion from having effect upon civil life. Now, if you follow the news or keep up with the newspaper, you know that the line between church and state, even though in the Constitution it's supposed to be a very clear line, is often dotted. In other words, there seems to be some wiggling back and forth whether or not the separation of church and state in America is as clear-cut as it should be. The next slide deals with religion and war. Now, a lot of people who are non-churched, who are non-religious, one of their criticisms about religion is that it, in effect, preaches violence. And if you've ever read through the different world scriptures, there are passages in the world scriptures that are in fact recordings of war and seem to be espousing violence. But in those same books, there are passages that embrace peace. So regarding religion and war, there's really a mix of teachings. And the last thing for us to touch upon with religion and war is the idea of a just war. And the idea of a just war is not found in Scripture. It is a belief that has percolated out generally based upon the work of scholars and theologians, that sometimes in our troubled world, war, should happen. War should be allowed in certain cases. And generally, the motive for war has to be for good and to bring about peace. And in case you're curious, what was the last time that the just war theory was invoked? And that was World War II. That's the last clear-cut just war that we were involved with. Reason being is that dictatorships had sprung up around the world in Germany, Italy, and Japan. They were cruelly upon their people, taking over countries, and it was obvious that those people needed to be stopped and to bring about a peace. So that's what's referred to as the just war theory. Then, looking at the self-check, you should be able to define and intelligently talk about social order. What is social order? The caste system, the terms Gentile and Dhimmi. Talk about regarding religious order, hierarchical order versus non, then the religious state, secular state, and then the just war theory. So, as always, if there's any questions or anything, please let me know what I can do to help. And remember to be well, do good work, and keep in touch.